Hi everyone, thank you for checking out my latest video. Now, just because we're in 2024, doesn't mean we have to stop playing our PlayStation 3 consoles. In fact, it was recently leaked that millions of people still actively play the PlayStation 3 every single month. And with how fantastic that the games lineup was for the PS3, I can definitely see why that would be the case. I think it's safe to look back now at the PS3 with fondness and say, even though mistakes were made along the way, those mistakes led to some pretty fantastic video games. And even today, there's tons of great games on the console to enjoy. Keep in mind that my video won't be all PS3 exclusives, but a good amount are still locked to the platform. The PlayStation 3 might go down as one of the most awesome, yet underappreciated consoles of all time. It's the redheaded stepchild, if you will, of the PlayStation home consoles for sure. It didn't really ever stand that much of a chance right from the start. No one wants to hear that they should go out and get a second job to be able to afford to buy one, and let's be honest here, when Sony went up on stage and said the PlayStation 3 would cost $599 US.
For $599 US.
Of course, most gamers told Sony that they were crazy at that price, but to Sony's credit, they did manage to put out a ton of fantastic games that drew people in. Price cuts and console revisions certainly helped along the way. But I wanted to do a video on some PlayStation 3 games that I still play in 2024 and that everyone should play, honestly. Of course, there's some games on the list that are obvious, but some that aren't going to be so obvious. And I also think that, I have a pretty varied taste in video games, so these lists often work out well for everyone. So buckle in, let's take a look down memory lane. Now, believe it or not, PlayStation used to have an awesome arcade racing game series called MotorStorm. And that's where this list starts off. MotorStorm had a few great PlayStation games actually, and as you can see, it really holds up even by today's standards. I know we all love the Gran Turismo series because it's so awesome, but there's just something really fun and special about MotorStorm and the accessibility of a great arcade racing game. It's something that I think PlayStation really misses these days. A cool thing about MotorStorm is it is not just about cars. It has trucks, ATVs, and even dirt bikes to choose from. It also has a ton of bumps and jumps, as well as an incredibly fun use of nitrous boosting in the game as well. Now, of course, there's no longer online servers for the game, but there's still a lot of single-player fun to be had, and trust me when I say it's one of the most recommended games I can give for PlayStation 3 owners. Now, next up, I wanted to talk about a game that I came across that almost no one remembers, and that's Remember Me. This is a really cool looking game from Capcom, and it's actually a victim of releasing too close to the next generation of consoles in 2013. It was right around the Xbox One PS4 launch date. An action-adventure game that still looks good even by today's standards. You play as someone who's in search of her memory after being stripped of them previously. Now, graphically, I feel that this game is still quite good looking and runs very well on my PlayStation 3 Slim, as you can see here. At its core, Remember Me is a third-person action game with melee combat that's pretty cool, and has some pretty intense platforming as well. Think Assassin's Creed meets Uncharted when it comes to platforming. At any rate, it's definitely a game I'd suggest to anyone with a PlayStation 3. It's a real shame we didn't get a remaster or a sequel down the line, because it's really a new IP that should have taken off in my opinion. It's literally so much fun going through these old PlayStation 3 games. I love it. I saw Starhawk, and I knew I wanted to add it to the list. Now, in the early days of the PlayStation 3 was a cool game called Warhawk, which was a multiplayer-only title that was quite a bit of fun. Also interesting to think about how Sony had some really good online multiplayers back in the day. It's kind of a stark contrast to what we see now from them, since they have a stellar lineup of single-player games as their focus. But Starhawk is sort of a sequel to Warhawk, but it features an actually impressive third-person shooter campaign to play through. Now, the story isn't exactly Shakespeare, but the idea that you're colonizing other planets for energy rifts is actually a pretty cool premise, if you ask me. The gameplay is inventive, and it varies enough to keep you busy for a long time. Now, sadly, this game didn't really sell well for the PlayStation 3, and the studio was forced to shut down afterwards, but it's still a game that I highly recommend, and it's actually still locked to the PlayStation 3. That's the case with many of these games that I'm listing today. Now, if you ask me, the game genre that we don't see enough of these days is platformers. So, I play a lot of the Jak And Daxter Collection on the PlayStation 3. This is sort of a cheat for a pick because this is actually 3 Jak And Daxter games in one. Believe it or not, before all the zombie and doom and gloom from Naughty Dog, they were doing awesome and fun, lighthearted games like Jak And Daxter. These games still hold up great and play really well on the PlayStation 3. The gameplay is still some of the best platform that you can find on any video game. Really takes me back to a simpler time in gaming before everything was kind of complicated and difficult and, just not as fun as this. At any rate, Naughty Dog usually doesn't miss. The creators of Uncharted, Jak And Daxter, and even Crash Bandicoot have some of their best work showcased in this awesome collection of games, and it's highly recommended because it's still pretty cheap to get, and like I said, it's 3 games in one. The next pick might be a little bit controversial, God of War Ascension. Now, I realize there's a lot of God of War games to choose from on the PlayStation 3. There's God of War 3, which is usually looked at as the turning point for the PlayStation 3 itself. There's the HD collection with God of War 1 and 2. There's even the 2 PSP games, which are also quite good themselves. But I went with Ascension because to me, it feels like the more personal story for Kratos. And while I love the God of War games, I think this one delves into his past the best. And we see a side of Kratos that isn't just anger, death, and destruction. This game got some flack when it released because it felt like a bit of an add-on to God of War 3. It was also kind of short, you could beat it in under 10 hours, and there was a tacked-on multiplayer mode, but the story itself was quite amazing and one I highly recommend to the fans of the series or any PS3 owners in general. The game is also still completely tied to the PlayStation 3, having never seen a remaster or re-release, and I actually have the collector's edition of this, which came with like a cool little statue and steelbook. Has there ever been a game that grabs you and sucks you in the way that Uncharted 2 does? I mean, look at how this game starts you out. Hanging onto a train that's fallen off a cliff? I've always said Uncharted 2 is where the series really picked up and got mass appeal. The first game is good. It's very good. But the second game is where greatness was born. This might be the best game of the entire generation, and it surely is my favorite PlayStation 3 game of that generation. We get to meet Chloe along the way and have an epic adventure as Nathan Drake. Who could ask for anything more? It's really hard to find anything to dislike. I still pick the second game as the best in the entire series. I know some people think it's the fourth, but to me, the second game is the best game. And even though there's remasters of these 3 games on PS4, there's something cool about playing the games the way that they were originally released. And to be fair, Naughty Dog did a great job with the PS3 hardware with these games. They still look great. Now, superhero games are super hot right now. I don't think anybody would deny that. X-Men Origins Wolverine might be one of the coolest and yet most overlooked games in history. The game was rated M and full of gore and destruction and guts and blood, but the movie was rated PG-13 and not well received at all. Now, the combat actually takes inspiration from games like God of War and even Devil May Cry. You have some pretty cool combat options for light and heavy attacks, and you can also use the environment to take care of enemies as well. So it's a game that doesn't really skimp on the fun factor or the gore, just like a Wolverine game should be. And much like a lot of other superhero games, Wolverine also has like a feral sense to help locate what you need to do and where you need to go. So it takes care of a problem that I sort of have in games where not knowing where to go is a bit of a problem. It's kind of like that in the Arkham series with the detective mode, but it's called feral sense. We know Insomniac Games is working on a new Wolverine game for the PlayStation 5, but this one should tide everyone over for a couple of years until that game can release. Believe me, it's well worth it. Next up is Shadow of the Colossus Remaster. Now with this game, I understand there's a full-on remake on the PlayStation 4, and that's cool and everything. That game looks great. I have that version as well, but this is one of the best PS3 games in addition to this version being, that being one of the best PS4 games. If you've never played this series before, you need to give it a try. The moment you come up against the giant and have to take them down one by one is an incredible feeling in video games. It's absolutely splendid. I can't say enough good things about it. The story is so sad, but also so good. You're tasked with killing the beast to be reunited with your lady.
Say some gangster is dissing your fly girl. You just give him one of these. Ooh, hey, ooh.
Now, I think the music and the gameplay and even the graphics still hold up very well in the game. This is a game that you'll never regret playing, and I always recommend it to people regardless of if they're going to play it on the PlayStation 2 where it initially came out, PlayStation 3 like me, or even the remake of the PlayStation 4. One negative that I will say is that it does take a little bit to get the controls down, but other than that, it's just a magical journey and a magical story, so enjoy it. Now, if you've watched my other videos, you'll know my love for this next game, Batman Arkham Origins. Yes, I owned it on PlayStation 3 as well. I still believe it's a travesty that this game did not get a remaster like all the other Batman games. To me, it has the best boss fights and some of the best stories in the entire series. And I understand that the game was launched right at the same time of a new generation in 2013, and I get that Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy weren't voicing Joker and Batman respectively, but this game is phenomenal regardless and deserves to be on every list that it can be. Thankfully, you can pick this game up very cheaply on the PlayStation 3 and enjoy one of the best and most underrated superhero games of all time. Getting to play as an early version of Batman is always a ton of fun, and they did an amazing job putting together one of the best stories in all of video games because they use a lot of villains and things that maybe you aren't familiar with, but some of them are even optional, and each time I've played through the game, I've kind of found a different one. I'd never used a walkthrough or anything like that, but I was really surprised to learn the amount of villains that were actually in the game. Now, finally, we've got Beyond Two Souls by Quantic Dream. Now, they've also done Heavy Rain, and my personal favorite game of theirs is Detroit Become Human. Phenomenal, check it out, trust me. But I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised by Beyond Two Souls. You play as Jodie, who has an incorporeal entity named Aiden that kind of resides inside of her. As Jodie, you use your psychic link with Aiden to solve various problems along the way. Now, the game is very much a game, but it's also kind of point and click in some regards. Think of a higher budget Telltale game. There's a lot of QTEs and tons of different options to pick dialogue choices that can actually affect the outcome of the game. This game also features an amazing voice acting job by Willem Dafoe, who delivers one of the best performances I've ever seen in a game. This is a game that does have a remaster, so if you prefer to play it on PlayStation 4 or even PlayStation 5 through backwards compatibility, you can, but it plays perfectly fine, looks perfectly fine on PlayStation 3, and it's one of my go-to games on the platform, and it still looks incredible as far as I can tell, as you can see here. Absolutely phenomenal. Now, you know, there's tons of great games I could have put on this list. Metal Gear Solid, for example, is a great one, but you know, on my previous list, I wanted to stick to as many newer games as possible. I don't like to use the same games twice. I know I did with Batman on my 360 list as well as this, but I don't usually like to do that. But it's such a good game, I wanted to get the word out. The main point that I'd like to make is that physical games are dying. You can still pick up PS3 games very cheap right now, and it's the perfect time to get out there and collect some of these gems and classic games, especially since many of them are going away forever. I mean, these stores are going to close down. Obviously, possibly next generation consoles might not even have a slot for physical discs. So if you're like me, you want to collect as many as you can, and now is a really good time to do that before all the prices go up. Now, if you do have an idea for a video, please leave it in the comments. If you enjoyed my video, please consider liking and even subscribing, as it helps out the channel really tremendously. Thank you each and every one. If you have already subscribed, I think it's really kind of blown me away, the amount of subscribers and things that I've got. Like I said, I've never had any kind of idea on what my goal was for the channel other than to have fun and play video games and put these video games together and do some lists. So the fact that, you know, I've managed to get almost 1,500 subscribers in such a short amount of time is mind-blowing. So thank you all. Tell your friends and give me ideas or critiques. You know, if there's something you don't like, let me know. You know, you don't have to dislike the video. Let me know in the comments. I interact with everybody. So thank you all so much. Have a great day. Game on, my friends. Game on. Peace.